Imagine for a moment that you are in front of a city surrounded by impenetrable walls. Armed men guard each tower, and behind these walls stand seasoned warriors, ready to defend their land to the death. You look around and realize that you are among a people tired of 40 years in the desert, a people who have faced endless trials, but who still carry in their hearts the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, finally, they're one step closer to that land. But there are gigantic obstacles ahead. What do you do when everything seems impossible? This is the atmosphere of the book of Joshua, one of the most impressive accounts, full of suspense, miracles, and practical lessons for each of our lives. Get ready, because what you're about to discover here isn't just ancient history. It's a manual of courage, faith, and obedience. And there is a deep secret in Joshua that can transform the way you view the battles in your life today. Stay with me until the end, because the revelation hidden in this book is more powerful than you can imagine. After the death of Moses, the great leader who led the people from Egypt to the gates of the Promised Land, the question arises, who can replace someone so extraordinary? And it is at this moment that God raises Joshua, a man who had already proven his faith and loyalty, the one who stood by Moses' side in battle and who believed in the promise when everyone else doubted. Joshua was not just a warrior. He was a servant who knew how to hear the voice of God, and that is precisely what makes him the protagonist of this new phase in Israel's history. God speaks directly to Joshua, "Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." This sentence is not just an encouragement, it is the key that holds the entire book together. Joshua's calling was not just to conquer land, but to lead an entire people on a spiritual journey. Here we have the first great lesson. True courage is not born from the absence of fear, but from trust in those who walk beside us. The first big challenge appears right at the beginning, crossing the Jordan River. The waters were high during flood season, and it seemed impossible to get thousands of people to the other side. But just as happened at the Red Sea, God shows his power again. When the priests put their feet in the river carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the waters stop and the people pass through on dry ground. Imagine this scene. Hearts racing, the sound of rushing waters, and all the people walking in silence, knowing they are experiencing a miracle before their eyes. Each generation needs its own experience of God's power. It was not enough for the children to have heard about the Red Sea. They needed to experience the Jordan. This is a message that resonates to this day. We cannot live solely on the faith of others. We need to have our own personal encounters with God. After crossing the Jordan, Joshua erects 12 memorial stones, representing each tribe of Israel. These stones would be a testimony to future generations, a reminder that God made a way where there was no way. This detail, often overlooked, carries a practical lesson. We need to create milestones in our spiritual life, living reminders of what God has done for us, so that we never forget his faithfulness in times of crisis. And then we come to the most famous episode, the fall of the walls of Jericho. This fortified city was the first major obstacle in the conquest of the Promised Land. But God's plan was unusual, unlike any military strategy of the time. Instead of weapons, God calls for silence. Instead of battles, he calls for perseverance. For 6 days, the people were to march around the city in silence, blowing only trumpets. On the 7th day, after circling the city 7 times, they were to shout at the top of their voices. And so it happened. At the sound of the people's cry, the walls of Jericho fell. This story invites us to reflect. How many times in life do we face seemingly indestructible walls? Problems, pains, fears, situations that humanly have no solution. But the secret lies in obeying, even when we don't understand the plan. The obedience of Joshua and the people paved the way for the impossible to happen. Within this story also appears the figure of Rahab, the woman who lived in Jericho and who, through her faith, helped the spies of Israel. Even though she was considered impure by society, she was saved along with her family, and her name entered the lineage of Jesus. This detail is simply impressive. In the midst of a city destined for destruction, a life is rescued by faith. This shows us that our past doesn't matter. Faith can place us at the center of God's plan. After Jericho, the book continues to reveal intense battles and divine strategies. In Ai, for example, the Israelites suffer an unexpected defeat because a man named Achan had disobeyed and taken forbidden objects. This defeat shows that victory depended not only on military strength, but on holiness and obedience. The people only win again when they correct their mistakes. The lesson here is clear. There is no point in conquering the world if we are defeated within. One of the most surprising episodes is the battle against the 5 Amorite kings. When the people of Israel were in danger, Joshua cried out to God, and one of the greatest miracles happened. The sun stood still in the sky, prolonging the day so that Israel had time to win. Imagine the impact of this scene. Time suspended, the army advancing, and everyone realizing that the God of Israel knows no limits. This miracle is remembered to this day as one of the greatest signs of divine intervention in history. But the book of Joshua isn't just about battles, it's also about inheritance, about promises fulfilled. After years of waiting, each tribe receives its share of land. And at that moment, the people see that God does not fail in any of his promises. From the days of Abraham until that time, everything was fulfilled perfectly. The book's ending is moving. Joshua, now elderly, gathers the people and delivers a memorable speech. "Choose today whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." This statement echoes with a timeless challenge. In a world full of choices and distractions, the decision to remain faithful to God is the greatest victory we can achieve. Now you may be wondering, what is Joshua's great secret that can transform my life today? The answer is this: the walls you face are no greater than the God who walks beside you. The book of Joshua teaches us that every obstacle is an opportunity for faith, every battle is a stage for obedience, and every promise of God is a certainty that never fails. If this message is already touching your heart, subscribe to the channel now, like and share this video. This helps us bring God's word to even more people. After the resounding fall of the walls of Jericho, Israel's fame began to spread throughout the region. Distant peoples tremble when they hear that an invisible God is fighting for his people. But as with every journey, victory also brings new trials. The next target is the small town of Ai. At first glance, it seemed like a simple challenge. After all, compared to Jericho, its defenses were fragile. However, overconfidence and hidden disobedience in the camp changed everything. A man named Achan had disobeyed God's orders by hiding among his belongings gold and valuable clothing that had been consecrated to the Lord. The sin of one man contaminated the whole people. When the Israelites advanced against Ai, they suffered a humiliating defeat. Fear gripped the nation, and Joshua prostrated himself before God, crying out for an explanation. It is at this moment that we learn another powerful truth. Defeat is not always a sign of divine abandonment. It is often a wake-up call to correct what is wrong in our lives. After dealing with Achan's sin and purifying the camp, Israel faces Ai again, but now with God's presence. The plan is strategic. One group pretends to retreat, luring the enemies out of the city, while another invades from the opposite side. This time, the victory is complete. The contrast is clear. Without holiness, defeat; with holiness, victory. Meanwhile, other peoples realize that they cannot face Israel head-on. It is in this scenario that the intriguing story of the Gibeonites emerges. They devise an ingenious plan. Disguised as travelers from distant lands, wearing worn-out clothes and carrying moldy bread, they convince Joshua and the leaders of Israel to make a peace treaty. Without consulting God, Joshua takes his word for it and seals the covenant. Days later, they discover that they have been deceived. The Gibeonites were close neighbors. What should we do in this situation? Breaking the covenant would mean dishonoring the Lord's name. Joshua decides to keep his oath, but the Gibeonites begin to live as servants among Israel. This episode teaches us something valuable. When we make decisions without seeking God's guidance, we run the risk of being deceived. But we also learn about grace. Even in the midst of mistakes, God turns situations for good. Later, the Gibeonites will be protected by the Lord in decisive battles, showing that even our mistakes can be redeemed by God's faithfulness. And so we come to one of the most epic battles in the entire Bible. 5 Amorite kings unite against Israel's ally Gibeon. Joshua marches all night to defend his new allies, and there something supernatural happens. As the battle rages, God sends down a hail of stones from the sky, defeating more enemies than the Israelites' swords. But the day is ending, and the darkness could give the remaining enemies an advantage. Then Joshua makes a bold prayer, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon." And the impossible happens. The sun and moon stand still, prolonging the day until Israel achieves complete victory. This scene is grand and mysterious. The Bible records that there has never been a day like it when God answered a man's voice in such an extraordinary way. What does this show us? That when we walk in obedience, we can pray boldly, trusting that the Lord is able to move heaven and earth to accomplish his purposes. After this crushing victory, Joshua's fame was consolidated. The enemy armies fall before Israel, and the book describes the conquest of several cities, kingdoms, and territories. It is a long and bloody campaign, but every detail carries a spiritual message. There is no enemy so great that God cannot defeat. However, the heart of the book of Joshua is not just the battles, but the distribution of the inheritance. This moment marks the transition from a generation of pilgrims to a generation of conquerors. Each tribe receives its portion of land, as promised to Abraham centuries before. Imagine the people's feelings. After so long, they could finally call a piece of land home. But not everyone receives their inheritance passively. Some tribes must fight to fully conquer their region. Others are satisfied with little, leaving areas still occupied by enemies. This detail reveals something profound. God's promises are real, but they require effort, perseverance, and faith to be fully realized. How many times do we fail to experience blessings because we settle halfway? It is in this context that the inspiring figure of Caleb emerges. Remember him? One of the spies sent by Moses decades earlier, who believed that God would give the land, even when everyone else gave up. Now, at 85 years old, Caleb appears before Joshua and asks for his share of the inheritance, but he doesn't ask for easy land. He wants precisely the mountains where the giant Anakim lived. With a firm voice, he declares, "Even today I am as strong as the day Moses sent me. Give me this mountain." This attitude is an impressive testimony. True faith does not retire. Caleb shows that when we trust in the Lord, no matter our age, there are still victories to be won. Another notable point is the establishment of cities of refuge. God commands that certain cities be set aside to shelter people who unintentionally cause someone's death. These places symbolize mercy and justice, ensuring that revenge is not taken hastily. This detail prophetically points to Christ, our eternal refuge, where we find forgiveness and safety from condemnation. In addition, the cities of the Levites, the tribe chosen to serve in the priesthood, are established. This shows that the spiritual life of the people could not be forgotten amidst material achievements. the presence of the Levites spread throughout the territory would be a constant reminder of the centrality of God in the life of the nation. As time passes, the battles diminish and the people begin to settle down. Joshua, now elderly, calls everyone together to hear his last words. And here, the suspense grows again. What final message would the man who led so many victories leave? He begins by recalling everything God had done, from the calling of Abraham to the conquest of the Promised Land. It emphasizes that it was not by the strength of the people, but by the powerful hand of the Lord that everything was accomplished. And then Joshua issues a challenge that spans the centuries. Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, the gods your fathers served, or the Lord who freed you. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. This statement is one of the most powerful points in the entire Bible. It's as if Joshua is saying, you have the freedom to choose, but I have already decided, and my decision does not change. This choice is not just for Israel, but for all of us. Every day we are faced with decisions, to follow the world's values or to remain firm in God's ways. The book of Joshua ends by reminding us that every victory, every promise, and every achievement only makes sense if we remain faithful to the Lord. Now here's the big reveal I promised. Joshua's secret isn't just in the walls that fell, the sun that stood still, or the lands he conquered. The secret lies in choosing who you choose to serve. Joshua's true power was trusting in a God who never fails. And this message is as relevant today as it was then. Today, our walls can be family problems, debt, illness, or inner fears. Our giants may be doubts, anxieties, and temptations. But just as God was with Joshua, he is ready to be by our side. Victory does not depend on human weapons or strategies, but on a life of faith and obedience. So before we wrap up this episode, I want to extend an invitation. If this message is already building your faith, subscribe to the channel now, like, and share this video. Together, we're building a complete series covering all the books of the Bible, and each episode will bring life-changing revelations. Time passed. Israel, after so many battles, was now established in the land. The people had defeated kings, conquered territories, and finally experienced the rest they had longed for. But, as always happens in history, the real test was not just in the war, but in what came after it. It is at this point that we enter the final stretch of the book of Joshua, one of the most moving and spiritually meaningful passages. Joshua is already old. He knows his time among the people is coming to an end. Looking back, he remembers every detail of the journey. The day Moses first called him, the moment he saw the land of Canaan as a young spy. The confidence he carried when everyone doubted, and the voice of God echoing in his heart. Be strong and courageous. Now, on the verge of his farewell, Joshua cannot let the people forget where they came from and where they are going. He gathers the tribes, summons the leaders, priests and elders, and before everyone begins to retell the history of the nation, it's as if he's saying, you need to remember. And then a powerful summary takes shape. It tells of Abraham, called from a distant land to serve the one God. It recalls slavery in Egypt, the plagues that broke Pharaoh's power, the sea that opened, the desert that seemed to have no end. Remember also the victories. Jericho that fell, Ai that was conquered, the kingdoms that bowed before the mighty hand of the Lord. This speech is not just a memory, it is a call to action. Joshua shows that every detail of the journey was not a result of human merit, but the result of divine faithfulness. He repeats more than once, "It was the Lord who fought for you." And here we have another crucial lesson. When we look back and recognize God's hand in our lives, we are strengthened to continue walking with Him in the present. But Joshua knows the human heart is fragile. He understands the people's tendency to stray. Therefore, his speech takes on a challenging tone. He sets before them a clear choice. If you find it hard to serve the Lord, choose today whom you will serve, the foreign gods your ancestors worshipped or the Lord who freed you. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. This statement is one of the most striking points, not only in the book of Joshua, but in the entire Bible. It's a personal, firm decision that echoes through the centuries. Joshua didn't just lead in war, he led by his example of faith. This is a very timely message. In a world full of paths, ideologies, and distractions, we need to decide daily who will be the Lord of our lives. The people, moved, respond in unison that they will also serve the Lord. They promise fidelity, renew the covenant, and recognize that without God, there is no future. To seal this commitment, Joshua raises a stone as a testimony and writes the words in a book so that no one will forget that moment. But there's something even deeper here. The book of Joshua doesn't just end with a renewal of the covenant. He ends with the reminder that the promise made to Abraham had been fulfilled. The text says, "Not one of all the good promises the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. Everything came true." This is one of the most powerful phrases in Scripture. Imagine the weight of that statement. Centuries had passed since Abraham's call, but every word God spoke had been fulfilled perfectly. And here is the great secret of the book of Joshua. God does not fail. He does not forget. He does not delay. He does not leave anything half done. All his promises are fulfilled at the right time. This is the revelation that should keep you going until the end of the video. The same God who opened the Jordan River, brought down Jericho, and made the sun stand still. It is the God who today can open impossible paths in your life, tear down walls of fear and doubt, and prolong your days so that you can see his promises fulfilled. The book also recounts the death of Joshua, the faithful servant, at the age of 110. He is buried in the land of his inheritance, as a testament to the fact that those who trusted the Lord to the end experienced divine faithfulness in every detail. All of this shows that God honors his word, no matter how much time passes. Now, bringing this message to today, what can we learn from Joshua? First, that the Christian life is a constant battle. We don't face physical walls or armed armies, but we do face spiritual barriers, temptations, and internal struggles that can only be overcome with obedience and faith. Second, every promise of God demands action. The people needed to march, fight, and persevere. Likewise, we need to actively live out our faith, not as spectators, but as participants in God's plan. And finally, we learn that true victory lies not only in gaining blessings, but in remaining faithful to the Lord. Joshua summed it up in his immortal phrase, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." This should also be our daily declaration, the choice that guides every decision, every dream, and every step of our journey. If you've come this far, it's because you want more than just to hear an old story. You want to apply these truths to your life. So I ask you, what walls do you need to see come down today? What promise of God seems too far away? Remember, the God who fulfilled every word to Israel is the same God who is ready to fulfill it in your life. Before I close, I want to make you a special invitation. If this video spoke to your heart, don't forget to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the bell so you don't miss the next episodes of our series on all the books of the Bible. Each video will be a new revelation, and together we will walk this transformative journey of God's Word.